Good evening, and on behalf of the League of Women of Houston Voters Education Fund and Houston Media Source, we'd like to welcome you to tonight's conversation with the candidates. My name is Brandon Mack, and I'm one of your hosts this evening. We'd like to welcome you to this conversation with the candidates running for Houston City Council, District C. I'm joined by my co-host, Courtenay Siegfried, who is also with the League of Women Voters of Houston. We'd like to notify you that this evening's conversation will be with candidates who have accepted our invitation, and all candidates who are present this evening will join us for the conversation. So I will turn it over to Courtenay, who will introduce our first speaker. Courtenay?
Hi, thank you, Brandon. First off, we have Ellen Cohen. She's the City of Houston District C incumbent and is currently serving her second term on council. She's lived and worked in the Houston area for the past 37 years, and she served for 10 years as the Executive Director of the American Jewish Committee and for 18 years as the CEO of the Houston Area Women's Center, working with survivors of sexual and domestic violence. In 2006, she was elected as the Texas State Representative for Houston's District 134. After serving 2 terms in the Texas legislature, Ellen decided to continue her public service career at home. She ran for Houston City Council and was sworn into office in January 2012 as the council member representing District C. During her tenure on council, Ellen has championed the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance, the elimination of the sexual assault kit backlog, the creation of a parking benefit district for the Washington corridor, and many other initiatives to improve the quality of life of her constituents. She served on several nonprofit and government boards, as well as received several appointments from President Bill Clinton, the U.S. Attorney General, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Governor's Planning Council, the Supreme Court of Texas, and Texas House Speaker Joe Straus. Ellen is also a breast cancer survivor. She determined that no other woman would endure the diagnosis of breast cancer alone and founded Reach to Recovery of Canada, a self-help post-mastectomy group. Welcome, Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you very much.
We're going to dive right in.
Okay.
So first question, what do you think are the biggest issues facing District C?
Well, I think District C, by the way, I do want to say I think District C is spectacular, and I'm really fortunate to represent them. I think District C has a number of interesting challenges. We have the greatest percentage of development, residential development. So that's one of the first challenges. People want to move into District C. And where are they going to move and what is it going to mean in terms of transportation? I think that's one of the biggest. The other issues are the issues that other people face, the infrastructure, our roads, problems with flooding, concern over safety, basic quality of life issues. And if I'm not mistaken, we also have the highest population. All council members represent about the same number, but the last time the numbers were given to me, it was close to 215,000 people. And it's a very interesting district, just so it might be that people don't know District C. So if you don't mind, I'll explain a little bit about it. It starts in Meyerland in the south, and then it goes down Braeswood. It goes through Rice University, through the Montrose. It includes Memorial Park. It goes up to the Heights. It includes Timber Grove. It goes all the way up to Tidwell and 290. So it's very serpentine, but from the south to the north, people care about the same things, the same quality of life issues. So I think those are the main issues kind of District C is looking at.
Great.
Excellent. And actually, speaking of quality of life, what would you consider to be the 3 quality of life indicators that you would use to formulate policy and serve your constituents?
Well, I think in general, it's, how are they responding to, when they open their front door? Can they walk out? Almost to the point that we were just talking about before. Can they walk out safely? That's a quality of life issue. That's a big one. Do they feel comfortable, walking in the evening around their neighborhood? That's a quality of life issue. Again, what about the roads? Can they maneuver them comfortably? There are places in District C that have sidewalks that are in good shape. There's some that aren't in such good shape, and the city doesn't take care of the sidewalks. But the point being that if you don't have sidewalks, or you can't walk comfortably on your sidewalk, or push a stroller, or ride a bike, or in a wheelchair, can you go out into the street? Can you manage to maneuver along there? And other quality of life issues. What's the condition of the neighborhood? Is the trash and refuse picked up properly? These are the types of issues that people, it's interesting. I'm going to digress just for a minute. But when Steve Kleinberg did his study, as he does every year, he talked a number of years ago to young couples and asked them, where would you like to live? And most of them said, we want to live out. We want a big yard, we want a big backyard, we want lots of space. He's asked that question more recently, and the footprint has changed completely. They want to live much closer in. They don't care that much about a backyard. They want to be able to walk to a grocery store. They want their children to be able to go to a school around the corner. So that's the quality of life that I'm hopefully can help my constituents maintain.
Excellent.
And with the addition of the bike lanes downtown recently, as an example, what else can we do to continue to build pedestrian or biker-friendly commuting options within the city?
Well, if you're talking about commuting options and you're talking about transportation in general, first of all, bike lanes I think are excellent. But if they're not competing with the cars on the road. And also if they can be ridden safely and not competing with light rail, and are careful about where they're riding. Biking is really critical, and we're doing so much now to have a connectivity between all the various bike paths. But if you're talking about commuting and you're talking about getting around, you're talking about buses, light rail, commuter rail. We have to have an integrated transportation system. We can't be the fourth largest city in the United States and not be able to get from point A to point B comfortably. It's great that we have light rail, but when you get off a train and it's 97 degrees out, it's really difficult to walk 10 blocks to your place of business. So is there a bus that's going to be able to take you from the train to a block within your business? These are the kinds of things we're looking at. And how do we get people from the outlying areas into Houston? I mean, this is really critical. I'm a big proponent of light rail in Richmond, so, which is in the district, so, I hope that comes through.
So in light of cases such as Sandra Bland and Michael Brown, how do we improve relationships between law enforcement and communities of color here in Houston?
Well, I think we do have a reasonably good relationships. I really do. We have an African-American chief of police. And obviously his sensitivity is clearly there. I mean, you get it when you hear him speak. But we have to have training. We have to have culturally sensitive training. We have to have our police officers become part of the community. We need more of the neighborhood policing. I mean, if you're a police officer and you know who lives in the area that you are protecting, you have a much greater sense of the people as your neighbors, and you're much more inclined to treat each other with dignity and respect. And I think that's the issue. I really do. And of course, I guess if we're talking safety for a minute, I mean, I just want to digress again for 1 second. I mean, we need more police on the streets, and we need more cadet classes to do that. And in the classes, that's where the training can take place as well.
Absolutely.
Right. We mentioned in your introduction that you have championed the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance. Since we know that, I'll ask the question a little bit differently, maybe. Can you explain to the viewers why you are supporting the ordinance and what we can expect in November?
Well, I wish I knew what to expect. I would feel a lot better. But let's take that second part. We're the most culturally diverse city in the United States. That says a great deal. That really does. So what it says to me is that people understand equal rights as well. Equal rights. This is not a GLBT issue. This is an equal rights issue. And one of the examples I use is if I was with a friend who was, let's say, my age, and I'm a little more senior than either of you, and I went to the new chic restaurant in town, and I was told at the door, although I could see other tables were open, that they just didn't have room for the two of us. It was clear to me as the young people walked in that there was room. Where do I go to? Who do I turn to? Until we have the Equal Rights Ordinance in place, I have to hire a private lawyer. I have to go through the federal court system. Once this is in place, I can go to the Inspector General. And it may turn out that the manager, the owner of the restaurant didn't know what the manager was doing. I don't want to shut down a restaurant. I just want to say, my friend and I want to be able to go into your restaurant. And the veteran needs to be able to go in the restaurant. And the pregnant woman needs to be able to go in the restaurant. And the people of color need to go in. There's 15 identities that need to be protected. That's what the Equal Rights Ordinance is about. So I have confidence in the city of Houston and its people. I really do, that they're going to vote for equal rights for all. And I'll tell you, if you have any question, I brought my show and tell. If you haven't read Lisa Falkenberg's column, it is absolutely spectacular and debunks the bathroom myth and talks about equal rights. And that's what it's about. It really is. Houston's going to do the right thing.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will.
I really believe it.
So what policies and programs do you feel should be in place in order to protect our city's economy?
Well, the policies and programs that have to be in place, I think, are much what we have right now. I mean, I think we are attracting businesses to Houston. We've got over 3,000 people a month, easily moving in. We've got, we have a reasonable tax base, very reasonable. We know Houston's growing the way it is because we are doing the right things. I think we have to make sure our education system, our public school education system is in place and something that we're proud of. Both my children graduated from public school. When you're trying to attract a company to come to Houston, they want to know what your educational system looks like. That's terribly important, but we have so many other things too. When we have the spectacular medical center, we have the port. We have so many things that Houston offers that if I was looking to relocate my company somewhere, Houston would be front and center on my list. It really would be. So I think we're doing the right things now.
Unfunded pension liability is a major issue for the city of Houston. What are your ideas about how to address current pension issues and how to prevent similar situations in the future?
Well, clearly, pensions issue is a big issue, front and center. And I've had the opportunity to work with the firefighters, with the police, with municipal employees. And I want to say off the bat that, these are really good people. These are people that are doing what they're doing for the right reasons. They're protecting us. They're making our lives more comfortable. And they need to be paid a living, reasonable wage, something that encourages them. That said, they're not interested in seeing the city of Houston shut down over pension. They don't want that because then they're going to lose jobs. That's not where we want to go at all. So my way of looking at it is that having spent 2 sessions in Austin needs to get out of the pension business. Houston has to be able to take responsibility for our decisions that we're going to make in terms of working with the 3 groups. I think we can make it work. I think we need to put a lot of things on the table and have a discussion over it, over defined benefit, over defined contribution. Talk about it. what are we going to do? Because if we look in our rearview mirror, we see Detroit. So we want to look ahead. And by looking ahead, we've got to come up with a system. And I will say this, the city council right now that's in place is a very fiscally conservative city council. It really is. And I think there is no interest in kicking this can down the road. I'm sorry to use that hackneyed expression, but I really think there is a strong sense of wanting to come up with a solution. And I think on both sides.
And speaking of city council, how do you feel about term limits, and do you feel that that particular system needs to be reformed or changed in any way?
Well, as you know, it's on the ballot now. We presently serve 3 two-year terms. The ballot is going to have 2 4-year terms. Personally, I think that 2 4-year terms is a reasonable way to go. I really do. And it's not just me. I have 72 civic clubs in my district, 72. The next closest ones are maybe 30 civic clubs, 20 civic clubs. I have 72. And when I'm out talking to civic clubs, I sort of do a bit of a straw poll, and I say to them, let me ask you, just nod or put your thumbs up. How do you feel? Most of the people in District C that I've talked to in the civic clubs have said that they think 2 4-year terms is the way to go. And our research shows that most big cities have 4-year terms, if they have term limits. I have 4-year terms rather than the 2 years. 2 years, it costs the city a lot of money. Every time we put on an election, it costs the city a lot of money. So I think 2 4-year terms is the way to go.
As you know, Houston has a very strong mayoral system, and council members have limited power. How do you plan to affect change if you were to go into your 3rd term with this limitation?
Well, I know we have the strongest form of mayoral government in the country. And on a personal level, I've enjoyed working for our mayor. I have found her to be open, accessible, not necessarily agreeing with me on everything. So while it is a strong form of government, I do feel that she and whoever our future mayor is will be reasonable in terms of issues that we want to bring up. I really think that it might be advantageous to have some way of trying to get something onto the agenda. I'm not in favor of what was proposed recently, but what it boils down to is that we only vote on something that's on the agenda. And how do you get it on the agenda? So I think there are ways to talk about possibly being able to get something. I mean, there is now, but it involves, I think it's 12 members, I'm just not sure. But I think there's reasonable ways of getting a message on, to get it on the agenda. If you're not talking about something that's so obscure, I think a mayor would be open to a discussion.
And how do you feel we could better use technology in order to communicate with our citizens here in Houston?
Well, I think there's a variety of ways. First of all, the city has a wonderful website. Okay, it really does. It actually works, and I, who am not technologically skilled, can get through it and can figure it out. So that's good. The first thing the citizens need to know that we do have a really good system. But here's the issue. What about people who don't have computers? What about seniors or people with some form of disability who aren't comfortable working computers? So how do we get messages out to them? How do we communicate concerns? One of the things we have is we have a pretty good library system, accessible to people, so that I think it would be very advantageous if the libraries were set so that seniors could go in there, people would help them in terms of how to work the computers, maybe a large screen computer, maybe even Skyping opportunities. Maybe during a council meeting, people sitting there could actually observe what's going on at a council meeting. Maybe there could be some form of interactive communication. And if not a library, then some of the senior centers, those type of things. And I think that And finally, I think our 311 system needs to be improved. And there are some issues with that when you call 311 and they give you a tracing number, it doesn't necessarily give you the answers that you need. And you may get a note that says your issue has been dealt with, but all that means is it may have been sent to a particular department. I think it would be helpful in terms of communication if I would get on my computer something that says this is where it stands, this is what's happened recently, something that would update me. So those are just some suggestions on communication.
So in a city as large as Houston, building and maintaining infrastructure is obviously a challenge. How do you think the city can tackle its infrastructure issues, and how do we pay for it?
So you think there's a problem with the infrastructure? Really? That's the first I've heard it. You mean potholes, those kinds of things?
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Well, and all right, so let's pull it down, though, to District C, because District C has a tremendous number of people that travel through District C. So we have, in fact, I was able to garner with the CIP project the 22% of the CIP money for District C and for infrastructure. We got to where we are today because we didn't do what we needed to do previously. In fact, not all that long ago when there was a problem with the water main in District C and they pulled up the pipe, it was wooden. It was a wooden water pipe. So you know it's been some time since they were able to do anything. I think the system we have right now works. I think that Rebuild Houston is the way to go. I know there's some frustration on the part of some people thinking it's not going fast enough. I don't think we should go back into debt to pay for that. So I think it should be, as the money comes in, we pay as you go, and we take care of the issues as they come up. But infrastructure is a huge problem. In some ways, the TERSs help with that. They pick up some of the projects that we want done, and we become a partner with the city. And so the TERSs will pay for part of it. In my case, we've got issues going on Westheimer that we've taken care of just about right now. I've got the Upper Kirby TERS, I've got the Midtown TERS, and if they pay for some of that, then the city doesn't have to, and that money can stay in the city coffers.
So, Councilmember Cohen, what are your views in terms of raising the minimum wage for public and private employees?
Well, I support raising the minimum wage. I think, and I mentioned that I think a couple of questions ago, we have to have a living wage for employees. We can't be a city of two separate groups. We have some wonderful, wonderful companies here that are very respectful of their employees, others that are not such good partners. And not only should the minimum wage be raised, but we have to make sure that companies are paying their employees, subcontractors are doing what they're supposed to do, and making sure that people can raise their children and their families with dignity, send them to schools that they want to send them to, be clothed and fed and housed. I mean, that's what we're about, not just Houston, but this country. So.
Go ahead.
Sorry, we're battling for the next question, I think. So we've been talking about the economy, obviously, in Houston, and you mentioned attracting companies to the city. Recently, we've seen a lot of major corporations choose to go outside the city limits. For example, the Exxon campus out in Montgomery County. So what can we do to bring these businesses into our business centers here within the city?
Well, Exxon was in the city, and they needed to enlarge their campus, and I don't know all the things that they were offered, but it was obviously attractive. But there's still a great opportunity to bring businesses to Houston. And I think, as I mentioned, I think that the tax rate that we offer is very attractive. I think the city can do some deals with companies that say, listen, we'll help you if you help us. I think that we have to make sure that we do have integrated transportation, because that's what people are looking for if they're going to move people here. We have to pass the Equal Rights Ordinance so that no company turns around and says, I'm not going to take my employees to Houston. They don't have an Equal Rights Ordinance. And, if you got to that subject, I was going to bring it around again. But, really, but that is true. I mean, I honestly have heard that, companies thinking of moving look at quality of life issues. The Equal Rights Ordinance is clearly, if the companies themselves have strong equal rights programs within the companies. They're not going to move somewhere that jeopardizes their employees, and the employees are going to turn around and say, listen, every other big city, every other city of any size in the United States has an equal rights ordinance, and that's very important to them. We jeopardize, well, among other things, this is not a scare tactic one, but we know that if the equal rights ordinance doesn't pass, the Super Bowl is going to take a second look at us, as they did in Phoenix. So if we want to attract companies here, we have to attract them on a variety of different ways: education, transportation, and quality of life.
So we want to give you the last word. So if you would like to address the city of Houston as to why you should be the next council member for District C.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you both for your questions. They were insightful, and I appreciated having the opportunity to talk about them. I've had an absolutely enjoyable almost 2 terms as District C City Council member. And I would appreciate having an opportunity to complete some of the things that we've been working on in a 3rd term. I find it very exciting to be able to drive down the streets of District C and know that in some ways I had some effect on getting something done, or that I'm working on getting something done. And visiting the 72 different civic clubs gives me a touchstone with the people that I really care about. I love what I do. I'd like to continue doing it, and I'd like to continue being your city council member. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Councilmember Cohen, for joining us this evening. So we're going to reset, and we're going to come back with our next candidate. And we're back. And so Courtney's now going to introduce our next candidate. Courtney?
Great. In this segment, we're welcoming Michael McDonald. He's been working in the information technology field since leaving the military. He mostly focuses on serving the home building and the oil and gas industries in the Houston area. Michael started out working in a grocery store as a teen and eventually moved into management. After a few years, he decided he wanted to serve our country and one day walked into an Army recruiter's office to set out on that journey. Over the years, he's visited various countries, interacting with locals. And Michael obtained a bachelor's degree in information systems while in the military and studied pre-law at the University of St. Thomas here in Houston. He has lived in the medical center in the Garden Oaks area in District C since 2005. Previously, Michael lived in the Galleria area in the early 1990s before joining the U.S. Army. Houston has always been his hometown of record during military service and since. He's also served in the Texas Army National Guard for 6 years, volunteering for every storm to hit the Texas coastline since Hurricane Rita. Welcome, Mr. McDonald. We're going to dive right in again. So first question is, what do you think are the biggest issues facing District C?
Well, one of the things that I've noticed, we have some very depressed areas around me that definitely need to be cleaned up. They need to invest in the area to, as far as the schools, make sure that they have the same things to offer that, say, some of our schools in the Med Center have to offer. I think that some of the classrooms do not have computer systems in them, or definitely not as new computers as, say, you would have going down Holcomb and Buffalo Speedway and that area. So these are some of the things that we need to work on in order to be able to give young boys and girls that are going to be becoming adults going into college to having the right sort of tools at their disposal. Also, some of the roads definitely need to be taken care of. We're having a lot of flooding going on in the Garden Oaks area where it wasn't so much of a problem in years past. We're now starting to see where constantly it's flooding. That's where you need to definitely take a look at the infrastructure. We are trying to rebuild that in Houston all over the place. But that is definitely an area that we're seeing a problem in. It needs to be addressed very quickly. A lot of damages to a lot of people's cars, and when you're living paycheck to paycheck, it's not really something you can afford.
So, Mr. McDonald, what would you see as being the 3 quality of life indicators you would use as a metric in developing policy to serve your constituents?
Well, definitely I'm really big into the arts, music, poetry, painting, sculpting. I think that those sort of things need to be very emphasized on in the schools. I think it needs to be emphasized in the community. Also, you take a look at some of the areas that have a lot of high crime rate. Obviously, if the crime is very high, the people are going to be very disillusioned. We need to get in there and put more cops on the streets, but also make sure that the right sensitivity training is done to where it doesn't feel like a heavy hand or a big brother coming into the neighborhood as somebody that is there to help you, which actually is their job. And for the most part, I think across the United States they do very well, with a few exceptions we've seen in the media, but fortunately we haven't really seen that here in Houston where any major instances. But we need to definitely do some of those things to be able to have peace and tranquility. Then you start to have people feeling better about things. When you're investing into the arts, we have a park being dedicated just north of District C, which I'll go to. It's about 3 or 4 streets north of me. Those sort of things are important to be able to support. People feel like you're right there with them, and instead of sitting on top of a hill as a king or a queen trying to rule the land, they see is that you're down there in the trenches with them, and that's something I learned as a non-commissioned officer in the military. Get in there with everybody, and you'll learn so much more that way as far as what's needed, how people are feeling about things. You can do surveys, or you can actually get there and shake hands and actually get it from them right directly from the constituent.
And since you mentioned the arts, I'll ask a follow-up question on that. Houston has a vibrant theater district and museum district. We're well known for the bigger arts organizations. But some have criticized the city for not doing enough to support the smaller arts organizations. If elected, what would you do to ensure that we have a well-rounded arts community?
Well, let's start by talking with individuals and these organizations that believe that we're missing in some areas. Hear what they have to say and take those ideas and put the right funding and the right people in charge to really push it along and see some growth in there, and then take a look back after you've put that plan into place and see if it's happening in the way you intend it to, and just nurture it along over the next few years. The arts is really how we define ourselves as a culture. I've been to the ancient city of Babylon and just amazed at some of the stuff I learned from archaeologists that would talk about the things that they were learning, scrolls that they had found, looking at some of the sculptures in Europe, some of the castles, and of course some of the poetry that's written from ages ago. It's really how you find out about the culture years from now of who we were and what we were about. To lose that would really hurt us in the long run, in my opinion.
And so what would you see as your vision for public transportation here in the city of Houston?
Well, we have actually a lot of buses out there, and fortunately we just had a major revamp. I think that was a very good decision. We also need to continue to do that, keep looking back at it, and is it really serving the community the way we need it to? Are things changing? And if they do, we need to put more buses, change routes. We need to do these things. When it comes to the light rails, I was actually raised in Atlanta where we had light rails and subways. You really can't have a subway here because of the ground, but you can have light rails. They can actually be very helpful. You could use one going down 45 from Kingwood, where somebody could live out in the suburbs and come in to work downtown and not put a lot of wear and tear on their vehicles. But one of the things you have a problem with too when you are doing a project like that is cost overruns. You need to make sure that you have a good project manager on board to make sure that everything is happening along in the time frame that it needs to be, and if it's not, find out why. And if need be, in the contract, there needs to be some penalties if the contractor is not performing the work at the pace that they're supposed to. There needs to be some realistic expectations, but when those expectations are set, they need to adhere toward it or pay a penalty back to the people for it.
You mentioned or alluded to this in your opening statement. So given the national discussion around police relationships with especially minority communities, how do you think HPD or Houston as a whole can improve law enforcement relationships with communities of color and GLBT community?
Well, I think probably one of the best ways to do that is actually grab the officers from those streets, the future officers. Do some recruiting efforts. So if I'm policing, if I'm going to become a police officer, I'm policing in an area that I'm actually living in, and I know the people already, I know the ins and outs, and it allows me to be able to better serve in that area. It doesn't make much sense. I live in Kingwood, but I'm a police officer in the 5th Ward. It makes more sense to me that encourage some people in the 5th Ward to join the police force and take some personal ownership in the neighborhood. And also, if I've maybe known this young man that's maybe not behaving quite so well, we went to high school together, I can probably reach him a little bit better because we know each other. We already have an established relationship. Those things sort of become a lot better possibility. I think it's a good direction to go in.
So the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance is going to the November ballot. With the understanding of the language being yes to support the ordinance and no to be against the ordinance, how would you vote this upcoming election on the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance?
Well, I think it's very important that we understand a few things. First is that we have a lot of laws in the books already when it comes to equality. I have no right to put my hands on you for any reason. That's called assault and battery. Also, the U.S. Supreme Court recently ruled that if I own a bakery, I can't refuse you service because of your sexual orientation, or if you're going to marry a same-sex partner. They've made that very clear. There are a lot of laws on the books already, and we really need to enforce what we have already rather than making redundant laws. With that being said, I'm definitely for equality, but we need to start enforcing the laws. And instead of putting something in there saying the exact same thing another law says, it's just redundant.
All right. With oil prices, especially last week, dropping well below $60 a barrel, many Houstonians are at risk for losing their jobs, and in fact, many already have. What policies and programs do you think should be in place to protect our city's economy and the people who live here?
Well, when you're starting a business, one of the first things they tell you is location, location, location. When you're trying to manage an economy, it's diversify, diversify, diversify. You have to have a multifaceted economy where we're not putting all our eggs in one basket. So if one area starts to slip a little bit, other areas and other industries within our city start to raise up, and it balances the whole thing out as a whole, and until, of course, the oil price raises to a level that can sustain that industry, and it eventually will. But until then, diversification is what we need to be focused with. We need to be encouraging businesses of all types from around the country and overseas to come here and do business in the Houston area. And I think that we have a very eclectic city where we do actually have a lot of businesses from all around the world here. And having regulations and tax system that encourages people to come here just makes good sense. That's the best way to do it. Not over-regulation, but not under-regulation. And the same thing with tax goes. A tax system that makes sense is very predictable, and that would encourage businesses to come here and stay here for the long haul.
So unfunded pension liability is a major issue here in the city of Houston. Mm-hmm. How would you address the current situation that is happening and also address future situations from occurring in the future?
This one hits me very personal. The day I retired from the military, I lost half my income right off the top. From midnight and into the next day, half my income is gone. Now, imagine if we had a budget shortfall in Washington, which we do, but they decided to attack my pension to help balance it. Probably isn't going to go over too well with me, considering that I've been injured in the line of duty and I've shed my blood for this country. And I'm sure a police officer or a fireman feels the exact same way when they run into a burning building to pull me out, risking their lives. And a police officer running toward the sound of gunfire, like I did in the military. It takes a special kind of heroism to do these things. And to turn around and try to balance the budget off of their pension is the wrong answer. You need to fund it appropriately. You need to make sure you're making good on your agreements that you agreed upon with the police officers union and the fire departments union. You need to make good on these things. You need to take a look at some of the overlapping programs, and I kind of touched on that a little bit, with overlapping laws in the legal system. Try to streamline things out. This is going to be your area of responsibility, your Meals on Wheels. So you're going to provide meals to the elderly. You're going to do this and you're going to do that. When we start to define everybody's role within the governmental system and the agencies under it, you're going to start to see some extra cash laying around, and that can help balance out the budget, as getting rid of the duplication within the system.
Dr. Kleinberg with the Kinder Institute at Rice University has said that economic segregation is the biggest challenge facing our city, and the Pew Research Center actually shows that we are the most economically segregated major city in the U.S. What would you do if elected to council to address this inequity and to ensure that we have more mixed income neighborhoods?
Well, you take a look at, I live in Congressional District 18, and you look at the other congressional districts around us, we're actually, our household average income is half of all the other congressional districts around us. So looking at a congressional point of view, and as well as the city council district's point of view, we do have some real issues within our area. And probably the greatest way to address income inequality is job training, giving people the tools to be able to obtain jobs that pay livable wages, not minimum wage, but a livable wage, one where I can actually flourish. And also have policies of if a company is not putting out regular raises and they're financially very viable and their stock is doing very well, maybe we could do some things to discourage that kind of behavior. If a person is working very hard for a company and it is flourishing, they deserve regular raises. Otherwise, you figure to yourself, what's the point? And you're not getting ahead. So companies need to behave in responsible manners. You definitely need to have the education out there to give people the tools to survive. And then you also have to have regulation and tax-based systems that encourage businesses to come here. So when they get done with their degree in engineering, they can actually become an engineer right here at home and not have to leave Houston to go find work elsewhere. They get to stay in the Houston area in which they grew up in.
Mr. McDonald, it's been recently communicated that term limits will be on the ballot this upcoming November. What is your position on term limits, and how do you feel the system currently is, or should it be changed?
Well, let's say the current system is 6 years, as long as somebody can stay in office as a city councilman. That really should be long enough for me to obtain some of the goals that I really set out for myself. And it's time to look at some other areas in which I can be of help. It really shouldn't take me 15, 20 years to obtain those goals. So term limits I'm absolutely for. It really encourages me to not become stagnant, to always try new things, go from here to, say, State House, and try to make some effective change to help out the state. And from there, you might decide to become a governor, or you might decide to go to Congress. You should always be moving around and trying different things and challenging yourself and not becoming stagnant. And it also gives the city fresh blood every so often, and allows new, fresh ideas to come to the table. And with that, and especially with that, you have diversification. With diversity, you have great ideas. You have better forward momentum as a city.
In a city as large as Houston, infrastructure is obviously a great challenge, especially when it comes to building and maintaining that throughout such a wide spread area. Mm-hmm. How do you think how do you think the city should tackle its infrastructure issues, and how should we pay for it?
Well, here's the thing. You have two issues. The drainages, making sure that the roads are wide enough to take in the influx of new people coming here every year. And that's always just going to be a major challenge. You can take a look as far as the infrastructure that's falling apart. Worse areas need to be taken care of first because they're in the worst shape. And the last thing you want to do is have a bridge collapse under and some people lose their lives. So that has to be a priority. One of the things I learned in the military is setting a priority list. You like to do everything all at once, but it's not very practical. So you take care of your biggest issues first on that. And on the other end of the spectrum, the roads. Which highways have the most traffic jammed issues, having the most accidents? Okay, well then that one needs to be a priority. Making sure I'm staying ahead of the curve is the city growth, how many cars I expect to be on the road in the next 10 years, and try to get ahead of that. And as far as affording these things, it comes right down to taxes. You have to be able to tax the public, to be able to pay for the needs of the public. The other alternative is to take loans. The problem with loans is that's a bill that's going to be coming due, and as we become more and more debt as a city, as a state, and as a nation, it becomes to where you're cost prohibitive, you can't get ahead, you're just swimming in debt. If the average taxpayer in the city of Houston has to live by a budget, so should the city. I can't write a check for $1 million and buy a Lamborghini. So the city should be doing the same thing. This is our budget, this is what we can do, and we'll project this idea 3 years from now, because that's when we'll be able to afford to do it in, and so forth. And you just kind of shuffle around the pieces to where it makes financial sense, and it also serves the public in the best sense at the same time.
So with Houston having a very strong mayoral system and council members having a limited power within that system, how would you affect change given that limitation?
Well, one of the things I came across in Iraq was you would have a village, and you would have two elder guys. They have grievances, and they have two different ways of wanting the village to run. And you come in there, you really don't know much of what's going on at first, so you end up being a good listener. Then you come up with an idea, and you try to really win these two guys over with your idea, and you try to really get a plan to push forward. Now, not every plan will push forward, but you just have to work with the mayor and try to encourage that this idea we're working on, and of course with the other city council members, hey, let's all get together and we can tweak this idea a little bit. You add your touch to it, and you add your touch to it, and then we come up with this bipartisan plan forward for the mayor. It's probably going to be received a lot better in that way, and just really come together. Instead of one person trying to tell the mayor something, you're coming together, all of you together, all 16 of you, to say, this is an idea we've come up with. We really think is great. What do you say?
We've talked a lot about economics today, and I'm going to keep on that track for a minute. Recently, we've seen a lot of major corporations electing to headquarter or have their large campuses outside of the city of Houston limits. For example, Exxon in the Woodlands. What policies do you think the city of Houston should introduce to make Houston more attractive than perhaps the areas outside of the limits?
Well, from what I understand on some of these outlying areas, they're offering some very good incentives for these companies to be out there. Well, the city of Houston's got to do the same thing. We have to take a look at what areas we can actually clear out and build something up. That also, keeping in mind, property rights is very important to me. So you're not bulldozing down people's homes and running them out of there to build some factory. You're taking an area that nothing's being done with, it's just an open field, and put a factory there, put a corporate office building there. Basically using the regulation and the tax incentives to be able to get them to come over there. That is, bottom line is corporations care about the dollar. If it's financially affordable for them to come to Houston and the inner city area to put up a building, they're going to do it. And you have to make that an advantage for them. If you make it prohibitive for them, they're going to go to the outlying areas. That's just the cold hard facts of it all. So play the same game that these outlying areas have done, mimic what they're doing in our area. And that also creates jobs for some of these economically hard-hit areas in Houston, like the 5th Ward and some of the other ward areas. Try to build some of these corporate offices around there, and that helps create jobs of all types. And again, with the education, to make sure that the teenagers coming out of the high schools have the tools to actually fit those jobs, and they're going to college. Try to encourage the businesses to help with the scholarships, to help afford some of these people to go to college. And if they do, we'll give you some breaks on your taxes or regulation or what have you. Just try to incentivize them to help the public. And then, hey, look, you're going to have an educated worker come to work for you, and he lives right around the corner. So you don't have to worry about him being late for work. He's only got 3 blocks to drive versus somebody coming from the Woodlands. I think that makes good sense.
All right, so do you support raising the minimum wage for public and private employees?
I would actually like to talk about a livable wage. Minimum wage really doesn't, I don't think it's really ever really quite made it. But talking about a livable wage, what is a livable wage? How can we get there? And what can we do to encourage companies to try to do that themselves, to lead the way? What can you do within your company to help get there? One of the problems with some of the corporations have been where they're focusing so much on their stock value that the old economics within a company really don't apply anymore. They've been kind of left off to the side, and we have this new model. So working with that new model, how can we encourage these businesses to start paying a livable wage from bottom up? And if it comes right down to it, that somebody just doesn't have the skills to have a job that pays a livable wage, get them there. Get them into school, get them in a vocational school, get them the tools. And but even for, say, the janitor, and somebody's got to do that job, what can we do to get their income toward a livable wage?
So we've come to our end of the time, and we want to give you the last word. So if you would like to address the voters of the city of Houston as to why you should be the next council member for District C.
Well, I've been around the world, and I've been living in Texas for a long time, and I've met people from all over, and everybody wants the same thing. They want to have a nice home, a car, a beautiful life, and some wonderful children, and hopefully grandchildren later. And those are really good goals. And I think that we need to have a governmental infrastructure that understands that and encourage those things and plants the seeds for people to have success with that. And I definitely think I'm very in tune to that. I've done it in civilizations where they've been arguing for thousands of years over very old grievances. And if I can get them to actually come to the table and agree on something, I'm sure I can do this in city council with people that really don't have the grievances that are quite as old as that. I think that we can definitely get there. I hope to earn your trust. I hope to earn your vote. And if I don't do a good job, you don't have to worry about term limiting me. I'll term limit myself.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald, for joining us. And on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Houston and Houston Media Source, we'd like to thank you for watching. We'd like to remind you that while this is a live broadcast, this broadcast will also be showcased on the League of Women Voters Vimeo channel and the Houston Media Source YouTube channel. So on behalf of myself, Brandon Mack, and my co-host, Courtenay Siegfried, we'd like to once again thank you for watching, and to please definitely check out vote401.org and other sources for more information about the candidates running in this and other Houston city races. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good night.